The alarms erupted like 1,000 screaming voices across the Valerian Empire's deep space monitoring station. Red lights flashed in rhythmic patterns, casting eerie shadows across the control room, where dozens of analysts sat frozen at their stations. Chief Analyst Vorn couldn't believe what he was seeing. His multiple eyes blinked rapidly as he stared at the display in front of him, his mandibles clicking together in a nervous pattern he couldn't control. Something was moving through their space. Something fast. Something that shouldn't exist. "Run the diagnostic again," he said, his voice steady despite the fear creeping up his spine. Maybe it was just a glitch, a sensor malfunction. It had to be. His assistant, Kella, was already working the controls, her clawed fingers dancing across the holographic interface with desperate speed. She pulled up the data streams from 3 different sensor arrays, cross-referencing each one against the others. Her face went pale as the results came back. "Third confirmation, sir. The object is real." Vorn felt his stomach drop. 3 separate confirmations meant this wasn't a mistake. Something was actually out there, and it was moving in ways that defied everything they knew about physics and space travel. "Impossible," he muttered, pulling up the velocity readout with a swipe of his hand. The numbers glowed in the air before him, and they made absolutely no sense. 0.47 light speed, nearly half the speed of light. He read it again, thinking his translator must be malfunctioning. But no, the numbers stayed the same. Their fastest dreadnoughts, the pride of the Imperial fleet, massive warships that took decades to build and could level entire planets, could barely achieve 0.15 light speed. And that was with their engines pushed to the absolute limit, burning fuel at rates that made the accountants weep. This thing, whatever it was traveling 3 times faster than that. What species has this capability? Vorn asked, though he already suspected the answer. He'd been monitoring the known galaxy for 40 cycles. He knew every major civilization, every minor power, every pirate faction that scratched out a living in the dark spaces between stars. None of them had this kind of technology. Kella brought up the identification protocols, running the object's profile through their massive database of known vessels. Millions of ship designs flickered past in seconds. Military craft, civilian transports, colony ships, mining vessels, pleasure yachts belonging to the wealthy elite. Nothing matched. That's the problem, sir. Kella's voice was barely above a whisper now. No transponder, no engine signature, no radiation trail, nothing. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Every ship, everywhere in the known galaxy, left some kind of trace. Engines produced heat. Fuel created radiation. Transponders broadcast identification signals required by 100 different treaties and trade agreements. Even pirates and smugglers, trying to stay hidden, left traces that trained sensors could detect. This thing? It was a ghost. A phantom moving through space at impossible speeds, leaving absolutely nothing behind. Vorn felt his blood chill, turning cold in his veins. In 3,000 cycles of Imperial dominance, spanning back to before his great-great-grandfather had even been hatched, nothing had ever moved through their space unidentified. The Empire saw everything, knew everything, controlled everything. That was the whole point of being an empire. You didn't let unknown things cruise through your territory at speeds that violated the fundamental laws of physics. He looked around the control room. Other analysts had noticed the commotion now. They were turning away from their own stations, watching him, waiting to see what he would do. Some of them looked scared. Others looked excited, like they'd just witnessed history being made. Vorn reached for the emergency comm panel, his hand shaking slightly as he activated it. This was going to go all the way to the top. The fleet command would need to know immediately, maybe even the High Council. This wasn't just some smuggler or lost colony ship. This was something entirely new, something that changed everything they thought they knew about what was possible. The comm panel glowed to life, connecting him directly to Fleet Command Headquarters 3 systems away, a priority channel that was only supposed to be used for invasions, rebellions, or catastrophic emergencies. Vorn took a deep breath, steadying himself. "Get me Fleet Command, now!" Admiral Thexus stood in the command center of his flagship, hands clasped behind his back as he watched the holographic display floating in the air before him. The three-dimensional map showed his 6 fastest interceptors as blue dots, chasing after a single red that seemed to mock them with its speed. These weren't just any ships. These were the Eclipse-class interceptors, the absolute fastest vessels in the Imperial fleet, capable of reaching velocities that would tear lesser ships apart. And they were losing ground. Thexus narrowed his eyes, watching the gap between his ships and the unknown object grow wider with each passing second. His pilots had their engines redlined, pushing every system past its safety limits. He could see the heat warnings flashing on his tactical display. Those ships were burning so hot right now that their hull plating was probably glowing. In another few minutes, they'd have to back off or risk catastrophic engine failure. But the mysterious object? It just kept going, smooth and steady, like it was out for a casual afternoon cruise. Visual confirmation? Thexus demanded, his voice cutting to the tense silence of command deck. He needed to see what they were dealing with. Sensor data was one thing, but nothing beat actually laying eyes on your target. Lieutenant Drow, his tactical officer, moved quickly to one of the forward consoles. His fingers worked across the controls, pulling up the live feed from the lead interceptor. The image on the main screen flickered and jumped as the ship's cameras struggled to lock onto something moving so impossibly fast. Then the image resolved, and everyone in the command center went silent. The vessel was unlike anything Thexus had ever seen in his 40 cycles of military service. It was sleek, almost impossibly so, with smooth curves that seemed to flow like water frozen in time. Dark metal, or maybe it wasn't metal at all, absorbed the light of nearby stars rather than reflecting it. No visible seams, no welding marks, no obvious armor plating or defensive systems. It looked elegant, beautiful, even, but there was something deeply wrong about it, something that made Thexus's scales prickle with instinctive unease. It was alien in a way that went beyond just being from another species. This thing didn't follow the rules. Every ship he'd ever seen, from every civilization in the known galaxy, had certain common elements. You could look at a vessel and understand its purpose, see where the engines were, identify the weapon systems, spot the crew quarters. This ship, it was smooth all over, like someone had carved it from a single piece of impossibly dark stone. No known design profile, Admiral, Drow reported, his voice tight with barely controlled anxiety. The computers checked every database we have. Nothing even comes close. And, sir, there's no energy signature we can identify. Our sensors are picking up the mass of the object, confirming it's there, but beyond that, he trailed off, shaking his head. Thexus felt a cold knot forming in his gut. Every ship produced energy signatures. Engines created heat and radiation. Power plants hummed with distinctive frequencies. Life support systems, weapons, shields, all of them left traces that sensors could detect and analyze. Engines? He asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. None visible, sir. There it was. No engines. No glowing exhaust ports. No reaction drives or ion trails. The thing was just moving through space at nearly half-light speed with nothing to push it forward. It violated the fundamental laws of physics that every civilization in the galaxy understood and accepted. Thexus clenched his fists, feeling his claws dig into his palms. This was bigger than just an unknown ship. This was a paradigm shift, a complete revolution in everything they thought they knew about space travel and technology. Whoever built this vessel had leapfrogged over thousands of cycles of conventional development. Project its trajectory, he ordered, forcing his voice to remain calm and controlled. A good commander never let his crew see his fear. The navigation officer, a young female named Petra, worked quickly at her station. Her hands flew across the holographic controls as she fed the object's current course and velocity into prediction algorithms. Lines of probability stretched across the star map, calculating where the vessel was heading. It's heading towards Sector 447, Admiral, Petra reported. Her voice wavered slightly as she continued. If it maintains its current course and speed, it's going straight for the Nexus Gateway, sir. Thexus felt his expression shift from concern to something like satisfaction. The Nexus Gateway. Of course. It was one of the major hyperspace junction points in this region of space, a natural choke point where multiple trade routes converged. Any ship traveling through this part of the galaxy would eventually pass through the Nexus if they wanted to reach the core systems efficiently. And more importantly, the Nexus was where he kept the Third Fleet on permanent station. 200 warships, including some of the most powerful dreadnoughts ever constructed. Enough firepower to reduce a moon to asteroids. Perfect, Thexus said, allowing himself a grim smile. His mind was already working through the tactical possibilities, running scenarios and contingencies. Whatever this thing was, however advanced its technology might be, it couldn't fight an entire fleet. Nothing could. He turned to his communications officer. Send a priority alert to Third Fleet Command at the Nexus. Tell them we have an unknown hostile approaching their position at high speed. They are prepared defensive formation and await my arrival. The officer nodded and began transmitting immediately. Thexus looked back at the holographic display, watching that red continue its relentless path toward a Nexus gateway. Prepare the fleet. We'll bottle it up there. Whatever this thing is, it ends at the Nexus. 200 Imperial warships hung in the void like a constellation of death, arranged in a perfect defensive formation at the Nexus gateway. It was the largest concentration of military power the Valerian Empire had assembled in over a decade. Massive dreadnoughts formed the backbone of the formation, each one larger than a city block, bristling with enough weapons to level continents. Destroyers and cruisers filled the gaps between them, creating an impenetrable wall of steel and firepower that stretched across millions of kilometers of space. Every captain knew their position. Every crew was at battle stations. This wasn't a drill or a training exercise. This was real, and everyone could feel the tension crackling through the comm channels. Thexus stood on his flagship's command deck, surrounded by holographic displays that showed him every angle of the battlefield. He could see each of his ships, their status readouts glowing in the dim light of the command center. Every weapon system showed green. Every shield generator was at full power. His fleet was ready for anything, or so he thought. All batteries stand by, he ordered, his voice carrying the weight of authority that came from decades of command. Around him, officers relayed his orders down the chain of command. On 200 different ships, weapons officers placed their hands on firing controls and waited. The object appeared on long-range sensors, exactly when the navigation computers predicted it would. That red dot materialized at the edge of their detection range, still moving at that same impossible speed, still completely silent. No engine signature, no heat plume, no radiation trail, just movement, pure and simple, as if the laws of physics had decided to take a holiday. Thexus watched it approach, his jaw set in determination. Whatever technology this thing had, it couldn't possibly withstand the combined firepower of his entire fleet. Nothing could. He'd seen Imperial dreadnoughts reduce entire asteroid fields to dust. He'd witnessed planetary bombardments that turned fertile worlds into lifeless rocks. The weapons at his disposal represented thousands of cycles of military development and trillions of credits in research. Broadcasting warnings on all frequencies, Lieutenant Drow reported for his station, his voice tense but professional. The communications array was sending out messages in every known language, using every diplomatic protocol in the Imperial database. Stand down. Identify yourself. Heave to for inspection. The standard warnings that usually made smart captains think twice about their life choices. Seconds ticked by. The red dot kept coming. No response, sir, Drow added, a note of worry creeping into his voice now. Thexus had expected that. Whatever was piloting that vessel either couldn't hear them, didn't understand them, or simply didn't care. It didn't matter anymore. They'd tried diplomacy. They'd given fair warning. Now it was time for the Empire to show why nobody challenged their authority in this part of the galaxy. Weapons range in 30 seconds, the tactical officer called out. Thexus felt his heart rate increase. This was it, the moment of truth. He watched the countdown timer on his display, watching those numbers decrease with agonizing slowness. 30 seconds. 25. 20. The entire fleet waited in perfect synchronization. 200 ships holding their fire, holding their breath, waiting for the order that would unleash destruction on a scale that defied imagination. 15 seconds. 10. 5. Fire. The void erupted in light. It was like watching a star being born. Plasma cannons discharged in brilliant streams of superheated matter that could melt through battleship armor like butter. Rail guns launched projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. Kinetic kill vehicles that hit with the force of nuclear weapons. Antimatter torpedoes streaked through space, each one carrying enough destructive potential to vaporize a small moon. It was enough firepower to slag an entire planet, enough to reduce a fleet to atoms, enough to kill anything that existed in normal space. The beams converged on a target with perfect precision, years of training and computer-assisted targeting coming together in one devastating moment. Every weapons officer in the fleet had done their job flawlessly, and every single shot passed straight through. What? Thexus started, his voice caught somewhere between confusion and disbelief. The mysterious vessel flickered. That was the only word for it. One moment it was solid, the next it seemed to phase out of existence, becoming translucent like a ghost. The weapons fire that should have obliterated it simply passed through empty space where the ship had been a microsecond before. Then it was solid again, unchanged, undamaged, completely unaffected by the largest military strike Thexus had ever commanded. The object crossed the entire blockade in under 5 seconds. 5 seconds. It phased through 200 warships like they weren't even there, like they existed in completely different dimensions of reality. Thexus watched in stunned horror as that red dot on his display simply moved through his perfect defensive formation without slowing down, without deviating from its course, without acknowledging that it had just survived something that should have been utterly impossible to survive. On every ship in the fleet, alarms started blaring. Sensor operators were seeing readings that made no sense. Impossible energy fluctuations. Impossible physics. The vessel was there, and not there at the same time, existing partially out of sync with reality itself. The tactical displays went crazy, trying to track something that apparently didn't follow the normal rules of existence. Warning lights flashed red across every console. Computer systems threw up error messages, unable to process what they were detecting. Through it all, the mysterious vessel just kept going, continuing on its path as if nothing had happened, as if it hadn't just been hit by enough firepower to destroy a small fleet, as if the entire Imperial Third Fleet was nothing more than an inconvenience, barely worth noticing. Thexus felt something he hadn't experienced in 40 cycles of military service, something he'd almost forgotten existed in his emotional vocabulary. Fear. Real, genuine, bone-deep fear. Not the tactical concern of a difficult battle or the worry about casualties. This was primal terror, the kind that came from realizing you were completely outmatched, completely outclassed by something you didn't understand and couldn't fight. Whatever humanity had created, it had just made the Valerian Empire's most powerful fleet look like children throwing rocks at a tank. Back at the Deep Space Monitoring Station, Chief Analyst Vorn was frantically pulling up every piece of data he could find. After the disaster at the Nexus Gateway, after watching an entire fleet's worth of firepower pass harmlessly through the mysterious vessel, the Empire needed answers. They needed to know what they were dealing with, where it came from, and most importantly, where it was going. Destination confirmed, Kella said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. She'd been running trajectory calculations for the past hour, cross-referencing the object's course against every star system in their database. Vorn looked up from his console. Where? Small yellow star. Galactic Rim. System designation. So, the name meant nothing to Vorn at first. So, just another catalog number among billions of star systems scattered across the galaxy. But something about it nagged at his memory. He'd heard that designation before, somewhere in the vast archives of Imperial survey data. He pulled up the old files, his fingers moving quickly across the holographic interface. The system information loaded slowly, the data clearly ancient by modern standards. When it finally appeared on his screen, Vorn felt his blood run cold. "We cataloged this 200 cycles ago," he said, reading through the survey report that some long-dead exploration team had filed. Third planet, Earth, primitive life. They'd barely achieved chemical propulsion. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Chemical propulsion, the most basic, crude form of space travel imaginable. Strapping yourself to controlled explosions and hoping the math worked out. Every civilization in the galaxy started there, burning fossil fuels and primitive rocket fuel to claw their way off their home worlds. Vorn stared at the date stamp on the survey report. 200 cycles ago. Just 200 cycles. In the grand timeline of galactic civilization, that was nothing. A blink of an eye. A single generation for some of the longer-lived species. How long does it take most species to develop faster-than-light capability? He asked, though he already knew the answer. He'd studied galactic history. He'd memorized the timelines. But he needed to hear out loud. Needed someone else to confirm what his mind was already screaming at him. Kella pulled up the standard developmental charts, the ones used by imperial anthropologists to predict when primitive species might become spacefaring threats. Averages 3,000 cycles from industrial revolution to faster-than-light capability, she replied, reading the numbers off her screen. Minimum observed is 1,800 cycles. That was a Krell, and they were considered exceptionally fast developers. Vorn did the math in his head, though his hands were shaking so badly he could barely work his console. 3,000 cycles average. 1,800 minimum. And this species, these humans, had done it in 200, maybe less, depending on when exactly they'd achieved their industrial revolution. They'd done it in a tenth of the time it took the fastest species on record. A tenth? What else do we know about them? Vorn asked, his voice hoarse. He needed more information. Anything that could help him understand what the Empire was dealing with. Kella scrolled through the limited survey data, reading off the basic observations that the exploration team had recorded 2 centuries ago. Bipedal, carbon-based, standard oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere. They appear highly adaptable to different environments on their planet. Multiple distinct genetic populations suggesting recent evolutionary divergence. She paused, her eyes widening as she read further. Vorn, the survey team, noted they were highly aggressive. Constant warfare among their own populations. They divided their single planet into hundreds of separate territorial groups that were in near constant conflict with each other. Vorn felt sick. A highly aggressive species that had just demonstrated technology centuries beyond anything the Empire possessed. A species that had apparently spent their entire development fighting amongst themselves, refining the art of warfare, while simultaneously advancing their technology at an impossible rate. What else? He pressed. They had just achieved orbital flight. When we surveyed them, Kella continued. The team observed a few primitive satellites and what looked like early space stations. The report recommended monitoring them in another 1,000 cycles to see if they progressed to interplanetary travel. She looked up from her screen, her face pale. Vorn, they call themselves humans. Humans. Vorn repeated the word silently, committing it to memory. In 200 cycles, that word was going to be known throughout the entire galaxy. He was certain of it. On his display, new data was coming in from the tracking stations. The mysterious vessel, the human ship that had just humiliated the Imperial fleet, was decelerating now. Its impossible speed was dropping as it approached its destination, following a perfect trajectory that suggested navigation systems far more precise than anything the Empire used. It was approaching Earth's solar system. The yellow star called Sol grew larger on the tracking display as the vessel slowed from its incredible velocity. It was being careful now, methodical, like a predator that had spotted its den and was taking care not to overshoot. Approaching home. Vorn watched the trajectory plot update in real time, showing the vessel entering the outer edges of the Sol system. It passed the orbits of distant ice giants, moved through the asteroid belt with casual ease, and continued inward toward the third planet, toward Earth. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just some experimental prototype or lucky discovery. This was a species that had built this technology, mastered it, and was now using it to explore the galaxy. If they had one ship capable of this, how many more did they have? What other technologies had they developed in their impossibly short development time? Pull up everything we have on human development, Vorn ordered. I want to know their history, their culture, their wars, everything. If we're going to make contact with this species, We need to understand them. Kellen nodded and began accessing the archive survey data, though Vorn suspected it would be woefully inadequate. 200 cycles was a long time for a species developing this fast. Whatever the old survey had recorded, the humans had probably changed beyond recognition by now. On his screen, the red dot representing the human vessel settled into a stable orbit around Earth. It had stopped moving. After crossing half the galaxy at impossible speeds, after phasing through an Imperial blockade, like it didn't exist, the ship had finally reached its destination. Vorn stared at that red dot and wondered what would happen next. Would the humans respond to Imperial attempts at contact? Would they be peaceful or hostile? Did they even care that they'd just announced their presence to a galactic empire in the most dramatic way possible? Only time would tell. The vessel settled into a stable orbit around Earth, and for the first time since it had been detected crossing Imperial space, it stopped moving. On Admiral Thexus's display, the ship now showed an identification beacon, broadcasting a simple name in standard galactic format, Pathfinder. For 6 hours, the Empire waited. Every communications officer in the fleet kept their channels open, listening for any signal, any message, any hint of what the humans intended. The silence stretched on minute after agonizing minute, while Thexus paced his command deck like a caged animal. His officers watched him nervously, wondering what came next. Do you try to communicate with a species that just made your entire military look obsolete? Do you apologize for trying to destroy their ship? Do you pretend it never happened? Then, finally, a transmission came through. The communications officer nearly jumped out his seat when the alert chimed. Admiral, we're receiving a signal from a human vessel. Thexus moved to the communication station immediately. Put on screen. The transmission was simple at first. Mathematical sequences, the universal language that every spacefaring civilization used for first contact. Prime numbers, basic arithmetic, the Fibonacci sequence. It was a standard greeting protocol. The way species told each other, we're intelligent, we understand logic, we can communicate. But then the real data came through, and Thexus felt his blood run cold. Embedded in the transmission was something that made his scales stand on end. Complete telemetry of Pathfinder's entire journey through Imperial space. Every single sensor reading from every monitoring station that had detected the ship, every attempted intercept by his pursuit squadrons, every targeting lock from the fleet at the Nexus gateway, every weapon's discharge, complete with energy signatures and trajectory data. The humans had recorded everything. They'd been watching the Empire watch them, tracking every move, monitoring every response. They'd known about the blockade before they reached it. They'd known about the weapons being aimed at them, and they'd recorded it all with sensors so sophisticated that they could apparently see through Imperial military-grade stealth and encryption. Earth had been watching them the entire time, and the Empire had never even known it. Thexus composed himself, taking several deep breaths to steady his nerves. This was first contact with an unknown species. He needed to be professional, diplomatic, careful. He drafted a message, choosing his words with extreme care. Professional greetings from the Valerian Empire, peaceful intentions, a desire to establish formal relations. He very carefully avoided any mention of the blockade, the weapons fire, or the fact that they just tried to destroy the human ship. He sent the transmission and waited, his stomach churning with anxiety. What would the humans say? Would they be angry about the attack? Would they demand reparations? Would they see it as an act of war? Earth's response came within an hour, faster than Thexus had expected. The communications officer's hands shook slightly as he routed the signal to the main view screen. The image that appeared was unlike anything Thexus had seen before. The face on the screen was strange in ways he hadn't anticipated. Smooth skin, no scales or fur or chitin. Forward-facing eyes that suggested a predator species, designed for hunting and tracking prey with binocular vision. An expressive mouth that seemed capable of a wide range of emotions. The human was clearly female, with short dark hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. And she was smiling, not a nervous smile or a forced diplomatic smile, but a genuine expression of warmth and amusement. "This is Captain Rachel Bennett, the Pathfinder," she said, her voice calm and confident. "We've been expecting you." The words hit Thexus like a physical blow. Expecting them. The humans had known the Empire would make contact. They'd probably known it from the moment Pathfinder was first detected crossing Imperial space. This entire situation had been anticipated, planned for, expected. Captain Bennett continued, her tone almost apologetic. "We apologize for not responding earlier to your communications. Our inertialist drive doesn't play well with conventional radio signals during transit. The phase variance creates interference that makes two-way communication nearly impossible. We could receive your messages, but we couldn't respond without risking damage to your communications arrays." She gestured off-screen to something Thexus couldn't see. "We have a lot to discuss, Admiral Thexus. Our diplomatic corps is eager to establish formal relations with the Valerian Empire. We've heard a great deal about your civilization from our preliminary observations." Then her smile widened slightly, and Thexus saw something in her eyes that might have been humor. "Oh, an admiral? Don't worry about the blockade. We understand caution. If an unknown vessel appeared in our space, moving at those speeds, we'd probably respond the same way. No hard feelings." The transmission included a data package, and when Thexus's science officers opened it, they nearly fell out of their chairs. It was technical data on the inertialist drive system, offered freely, without negotiation or demand for payment. Pages and pages of equations, schematics, engineering specifications. The kind of information that civilizations usually guarded as their most precious secrets. Thexus's chief scientist looked at the data for 30 seconds before shaking his head. "Admiral, this will take us decades to understand. Maybe longer. This isn't just advanced technology. This is an entirely different approach to physics." But Captain Bennett wasn't finished. She leaned forward slightly, her expression becoming more serious. "Also, Admiral, you should know something. Pathfinder isn't alone. We have 11 other ships of the same class, exploring different vectors of the galaxy. They'll be reporting back over the next few months. Earth's exploration program is just getting started." Thexus realized his mouth was hanging open. 12 ships. 12 vessels with technology that made the Empire's best warships look like children's toys. 12 ships out exploring the galaxy right now, mapping territories, making observations, probably cataloging every military installation and strategic resource the Empire possessed. "We look forward to meeting the Valerian Empire properly," Captain Bennett concluded. "Humanity is pleased to join the galactic community. We have so much to learn from civilizations like yours, and we hope we can contribute our own knowledge in return. I think this is going to be the beginning of a wonderful friendship." The transmission ended, leaving Thexus staring at a blank screen. Later, in his private ready room, Thexus sat heavily in his command chair, the weight of what had just happened pressed down on him like a physical force. 3,000 cycles of imperial supremacy. 3,000 cycles of being the dominant military power in this region of space. 3,000 cycles of other species looking up to the Valerian Empire with respect and fear. And in just 200 cycles, a cosmic eye blink in the grand timeline of galactic history, these humans had surpassed them all, not just matched them, not just caught up. They'd leapfrogged over millennia of conventional development and left the Empire behind. He thought about those 12 ships. He thought about the casual way Captain Bennett had offered their most advanced technology like it was no big deal. He thought about that smile, confident and warm, and utterly fearless. The humans weren't intimidated by the Empire. They weren't concerned about the military power that Thexus commanded. They just wanted to be friends. Humanity hadn't just arrived on the galactic stage. They'd arrived faster than anyone thought possible, with technology nobody understood, an attitude that suggested they were only getting started. This wasn't the end of anything. This was a beginning. The galaxy was about to change in ways Thexus couldn't even imagine, and the Valerian Empire would have to adapt or be left behind.